Welcome back, guys. So today we're draining the fuel out of the tank. I'm just draining it from the fuel pump, taking the front cover and just slightly loosening it. Went ahead and changed this gauge to a higher PSI gauge because I'm going to bump the fuel pressure up some, and I'd like to be able to see the difference between the pump and the filter at the engine bay, which is up here on the rails. So what's pretty cool is that this right here is after the filter, right? So there's the fuel filter. This is the after the fuel filter, right before it returns back to the tank. So if you have a pressure gauge right off the pump, right here on the back of the car, and then you have one right before the return, after the filter, then it gives you the pressure drop across the filter and gives you the pressure drop of the fuel line. So I have an 8AN fuel line that runs from the outlet of the pump. It comes into the engine bay, it runs through the fuel rails, which feeds the injectors, and then returns back to a 10AN line, which is the return line that goes to the fuel cooler and the trunk. And so what's really cool about this is that by having a pre-pressure or a pre-filter pressure gauge and then a post-filter pressure gauge, that lets you know how clogged your filter is in the engine bay. And so as the pressures change, or there becomes more of a differential between the two, it lets you know that your fuel filter is beginning to become clogged. Now, these swatches here, powder coating, I don't know which one I like best. You know, I've got one with a more of a metallic flake. I wanted to go a little bit darker, so you can see it's a little bit darker, but it kind of matches with the metal flake. Then I've got this one here, which has less metal flake in it. It's more of a gray, which I think could be really cool. So I'm not really sure yet. I'm gonna have to decide on that. And then I'm gonna do the bell housing this color, and the transmission one of these silvers as well. So whatever silver we go with, we're gonna do the wheels and the transmission, and we're gonna do the bell housing right here. So that'll look really nice and be really cool. The reason I want to do the bell housing is so that the clutch dust doesn't build up on the transmission. Then, you know, when you're pulling it on and off multiple times in the future to, you know, maybe work on the clutch or whatever you have to do, all the stuff that builds up, all this dust and stuff, you know, it'll just wipe right off. So that's kind of the plan. I've got the fuel pump off. Went ahead and cleaned the filter. There's a little filter unit that's inside this fitting right here. You can see the fuel filter sits up on here like this. This right here is our hex drive. So that's the female receiver, and that spins. The cable that runs under the car from the oil pump spins that, and it spins this hex drive on the back of the pump right here, which turns the pump. So now I've got all the bolts out of the cover. I'm going to remove the pump cover and pull the gears out to inspect and make sure that they haven't been worn down like crazy. And a lot of people tell me, oh, you can't run a mechanical pump like this on the street because you're going to wear the gears out. So let's see what we got. So there is one of our gears. Looks brand new. I don't see a single issue. O-ring looks perfect. Gear looks great. So let's look inside the pump. Looks pretty good to me. It's hard to see on the camera. If we get down in there, I don't see any wear on the face of the pump. So this thing looks pretty good to go as far as I'm concerned. I'm gonna wipe it up a little bit, put some two-stroke oil back in it to help lubricate the internal some, so it's not dry when I try to restart the engine. And I'm gonna suck these dirt particles up with the vacuum cleaner, put a little bit of grease in the end of this fitting, and throw it all back together. Clean up the 90-degree AN, and she should be ready to go. It's probably the most reliable setup I've ever ran in my life, so super stoked. And the screen wasn't even very dirty, it had a little bit of dirt on it, so pretty awesome, man. Let's get it back together. All right, fuel pump is back on and reassembled. Now we're just gonna come up here and change the filter that is pre-injector. The reason I have this filter up here in the engine bay is because I want it as close to the injectors as possible, so that if the fuel pump puts out any sort of metal or debris or anything like that, because it is so powerful, it'll push whatever it wants to. We catch it right before the injectors. It keeps the injectors as clean as possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this bad boy out, and we'll see what the element looks like, and we're gonna replace it with a 6 micron Fuel Lab filter, which is made of fiberglass. It's very important that if you're running a high pressure, high volume fuel system like this, where you're doing crazy stuff, that you use fiberglass or stainless steel. Do not use paper, because it'll crush up, it'll fold in on itself, and it'll screw your system up, and you'll have like massive issues. So this is our fiberglass element right here. We're gonna replace this Fuel Lab unit with this fiberglass element. Do not skimp on these things, man. This is what you have to do if you're gonna run E85, especially in your rotary. And I would run it on gasoline anyways. If I was gonna run gasoline, I'd use the same size filter, 6 micron fiberglass unit. So remove the unit from the filter housing. I love this setup because I don't even have to pull the housing off. And here's the filter. As you can see, it's pretty much perfect. I don't see any dirt, nothing. Looks beautiful. This is the new one. Only reason it's a different color is because it's not wet. So we're gonna go ahead and put the new one in, and we'll save this as a backup just in the future, just in case, but it looks pretty clean. So can't complain. All right, now we're gonna give it a little test fire. I just primed the system, let it fire it up for about 2 seconds. Now we're gonna let it run for a little bit longer, and just give it a rev, make sure everything feels good. And we're gonna check the fuel pressure front and back. So come in here, flip the ignition on, and fire in the hole.